The fork never reached my plate. I hid in the kitchen, too tired to answer my father's scorn. "You're just a useless veteran," he spat toward the doorway so the whole table could hear. Then headlights washed the curtains. White Ford Hummers settled into Grandma's gravel like they knew the house by heart, and a SEAL team slipped through the side door, quiet, efficient, while a plainclothes officer lifted a phone that read, "Urgent orders, DC." 3 hours earlier, I was staring at Amelia's letter, real stationery with raised floral corners, and her precise cursive dinner at Grandma's. Sunday, 6:0 p.m., family only. No heart, no smile, no mercy. Chesterville hadn't changed. Same gas pump that clicks off too soon, same brick church, same neighbors who wave before they remember why they stopped. I came anyway, in a plain sweater and quiet shoes that said nothing about what I carried. Training teaches you to be invisible when it counts. Grandma opened the door with a small gasp. Her hug was thinner now, her eyes still needle-sharp. "Don't rise to it, sweetheart," she whispered. "Lemon polish pot, roast the runner's old snag, everything smelled like before." Amelia had widened the aisle to the head chair and hung a chandelier that caught every breath. The seat at the top was hers, now not Grandma's. Family arrived in the old choreography Uncle Ray, bragging about 89 Aunt Maggie, balancing a casserole like an accusation, cousins pretending not to film. Dad stood with the ownership of a man who never asks for a chair. He looked me over like a used truck, kicked the tire price it low move on. "Look who remembered the front door," he said. Not kindly. "Good to see you, Dad," I answered. It costs less than arguing. Amelia, last of course, blazer badge at her hip bun that stung to look at. Chief of police fits her the way a spotlight fits a stage. She didn't hug me. She measured me. I let her. We sat. Grace was simple. Plates moved. I passed the rolls and complimented the potatoes because courtesies are armor. Dad started with the small cuts that pretend to be questions. "Do you have a real job?" Planning to stop running, and when I refused the bait, his voice rose, fishing for a jury. "You left this family," he told the table. "All those years playing soldier and nothing to show for it." I took a sip of water and watched the chandelier tremble from the furnace. "Eat while it's hot," I said to no one. Amelia tapped her fork. The room behaved like an audience. She stood deliberate. "Before we eat, I need to address something important." Grandma's knuckles went white. Amelia opened a red folder. Photos, tabs, glossy sleeves, props arranged like proof. "Some of you have asked what my sister actually does," she said. I looked into it. There are inconsistencies. Pause. There are lies. I didn't look at the photos. I counted exits, breaths angles. Silence is not surrender. It's assessment. Amelia, Grandma said, voice cracking. "Not tonight." "Especially tonight," she said, and produced handcuffs with a neat flick metal, bright as coins. She came behind me and took my hands. The bracelets closed, click then a tighter click that said she wanted me to feel it. Dad exhaled like pressure left his spine. Finally, he said, "Pain is information." I breathed the way the corpsman taught us, in through the nose, out through the teeth. I've been hogtied in surf while instructors shouted the ocean didn't care. Steel on wrists is noise, not threat. Lily and Amelia said, savoring the name you're under arrest for impersonating. Movement in the corner window, a man walking a dog that didn't sniff. Wrong leash, slack, wrong pace. Not a neighbor. Placement, not coincidence. I pressed a hidden switch at my belt. One buzz smaller than a heartbeat and gone. Cousins leaned in. Aunt Maggie whispered, "Oh my." Grandma stared at folded hands like she could press the family together. Amelia loved a sermon. She talked timelines and sources and words she didn't understand enough to fear. Uncle Ray squinted at a page upside down. Dad soaked in the show as if the television had finally remembered him. "See," he told the room. "Pretending. Secrets and drama." I met his eyes. "Your roast is getting cold," I said. He mistook that for defiance. Let him. Convoys announced themselves in rhythm. Light pooled through lace. Gravel translated weight to every man at the table who has ever owned a truck. The house held its breath. Even Amelia paused on a hinge of a sentence. The side door creaked. I didn't stand. I did not spend a word. Boots took the kitchen tile like periods, not exclamation points. A plainclothes officer stepped into the doorway and held up a phone. Urgent orders, DC. Another hand reached past and found the ratchet on my cuffs. The lock released with a soft, competent click. No apology. Real authority doesn't apologize for restoring order. Dad set his glass down hard enough to leave a ring on Grandma's linen. The chandelier didn't tremble. Neither did I. The air changed by a degree you feel only if you've trained for weather inside of rooms. I folded my hands and kept breathing. Only then did time slow back to normal. Here's the truth. I wasn't tired of my father. I was tired of the theater. I had no appetite to feed it. I've learned what silence can do, that speeches can't hold a perimeter. Buy minutes, keep oxygen where you'll need it. Tonight, I needed minutes more than mercy. The letter was bait, the folder, a script, the cuffs a prop. Amelia wanted an audience and a verdict. I wanted calm. When the boots crossed the threshold and the cuffs opened without fanfare, calm walked in with them. I didn't look at Amelia. I watched Grandma exhale. I listened to the heater cycle. I smelled the pot roast going dry. Ordinary details, because ordinary is what people forget when they're busy mistaking noise for truth. That's all part one needs to be the moment the noise gets quiet enough to hear what's real. The rest was already on its way. I used to think silence was a flaw they forgot to sand off me in BUDS. You learn to shut up in the surf when cold slices your bones into tiny bright pieces and the instructors pace the shoreline like metronomes of doubt. You don't plead with the Pacific. You measure it. Count waves. Count breaths. Count the seconds between when someone starts to panic and when they decide not to. The ocean and family have that in common. Both drown you if you argue with them the wrong way. We were class 2-7-something. Numbers matter. They make you real. Day 3. I watched a man twice my size hand his helmet to the bell with both hands, like he wanted it to take the memory from him. I didn't judge. You never judge out there. You just keep your grip and your count and your reasons. Mine were small and sharp. Grandma's laugh when she beat me at cribbage, the way Virginia summer hangs in your lungs. My sister's eyes the day I shipped out, and she didn't look up. Reasons are anchors. You tie them tight, and you don't tell anyone what they are. Drown-proofing isn't meant to break you. It's meant to teach you what breaks you. Wrists bound, ankles tied, bobbing on command, you learn that water doesn't hate you. It simply doesn't notice. I swallowed enough salt to season every pot roast Grandma ever made, and when the world finally stopped spinning, a corpsman handed me a towel and said, "You breathe like a watch." I took it as a compliment. He meant I was precise, even when I shook. That stayed. The first scar that mattered wasn't the one you could see. It was the phone call after Hell Week when my voice was new and raw and the payphone tasted like copper. Mom picked up on the second ring and said I sounded far away. That's the point, I joked. Silence. Then her careful sentences about Amelia covering bills, Amelia driving Grandma to appointments, Amelia talking to the pastor, Amelia making chicken salad for the funeral committee at church like a dutiful headline. I said I was proud of her. It came out simpler than I felt. "Come home for Thanksgiving," Mom said. "If the Navy lets me," I said, and we both pretended the pause after wasn't grief. Dad didn't call. He preferred statements you could frame on the wall. When I did see him, he'd say, "Military's fine when you're 22. What's the plan when it stops clapping?" The plan was always the same: do the job so well, no one needs to clap. SEAL work is small problems solved fast. People think it's all explosions and headlines. Mostly it's lists, gear checks at 0400, lining up edges on maps with the same reverence other people save for hymns. A torn thumbnail you tape and forget. The constant minor ache of preparation, the way a house hums when the air conditioner kicks on. Quiet competence doesn't photograph well, so you learn to live without pictures. And you learn, if you're smart, that the loudest person at the table is usually the least certain. The last deployment I can name out loud teaches the same lesson in a new dialect. Desert, not ocean. Heat, not cold. Night vision green, making everything look like the world is about to remember you wrong. I carried a pack that made my shoulders feel like borrowed equipment. I slept in bursts, 20 minutes on a rooftop, 8 minutes in a stairwell, 9 minutes behind a berm, while a lieutenant whispered coordinates into a handset like a prayer. When we rotated stateside, I slept through 3 alarms and still woke up tired. That's when Dr. Grant wrote fatigue in a notebook and asked if I jumped when a door slammed. Only if a drone comes through it, I said, and he smiled like that was proof I was still reachable. People at home aim their love like flashlights, always searching for something to reveal. Amelia's love, if that's what you call it, came with checklists. She liked that I was decorated. She didn't like that I wouldn't decorate her story with details. You act like secrets make you special, she told me once over coffee. I didn't finish. They make me safe, I said. She rolled her eyes the way she used to when I beat her to the mailbox. You left, she said. You stayed, I said. We both said, you chose without saying it. I learned early that if you give some people 3 sentences, they'll build a gallows with them. The trick is giving 2. When her letter came, the raised floral corners pretending to be tender, I tried to ignore it. Then I put it in my pocket like a stone and felt its corners all day. The bass sounded the same, forklifts, distant rotors, the metallic thud of work getting done, but the letter changed the pitch of everything. I filed for leave like someone who trusts systems because she's helped build them. OSDI pinged back the expected approvals in the expected order checkboxes you can feel, even when you don't see them. I didn't take a dress uniform. I didn't take medals. The one civilian outfit I packed was deliberately plain the way a blank page is honest. On the bus into town, the driver kept glancing in the rear view like he recognized a story he couldn't place. Chesterville looks smaller, the way places shrink when you finally grow into your bones. The gas station still had the sign that promised cheap coffee and delivered it. The church still believed gossip was fellowship if you tied a casserole to it. Grandma's porch still needed paint near the railing where we used to tie a jump rope and call it training. Don't rise to it, she whispered when she opened the door, and I didn't ask how she knew what it was. She always knew the temperature of the room before stepping into it. Inside the house, held its old chorus lemon polish pot, roast the faint ghost of my grandfather's aftershave from a drawer no one opens. Amelia's touches announced themselves like she was afraid someone might miss them, a chandelier that threw light like confetti, a framed certificate near the kitchen that said, authority, even when no one was reading. Dad took up space with that proprietary lean he favors, the one that says, this living room owes him rent. He assessed me like a contractor pricing drywall he doesn't want to install. You look fine, he said, finding the cheapest compliment and handing it over like a receipt. Thanks, I said, because I'm generous when I can be. What I didn't tell anyone, not Grandma, not Mom, not the mirror, was that I'd already felt the dragline snagging. Piper, one of ours, who talks in footnotes because she never forgets a qualifier, had messaged me 2 days prior. Unlicensed inquiry, flagged near you, possible PI touching federal fences. People like Amelia think private investigator means a man in a hat with a camera and ethics. It often means someone who believes a lock is just an opinion. Piper advised awareness, not action. We're watching, she sent. That was enough. So I showed up and did not announce myself. I poured water. I passed rolls. I let Dad expend his inventory of barbed remarks. When he said useless veteran, I filed it under predictable and finished my sip. When Amelia opened her folder, I cataloged the tells exhibits printed on a home office printer chain of custody that would embarrass a rookie, photos taken at angles that make innocent things look like proof. She talked about stolen valor, like she'd said the words in a mirror to see how righteous her mouth looked making them. I didn't interrupt. Why offer her a better line? What I did do was notice the dog walker. Without a dog who'd been circling the block too long. The leash hung wrong. The man's shoes were wrong for the sidewalk. And when he pretended to pick up what nothing left, he did it in the sightline of someone who's trained to read the geometry of a scene. Every bad play uses the same props. The signal at my belt is not dramatic. It's a whisper passing into a system that was built to catch whispers. It says, someone who shouldn't is making a mess. It asks, do you see me? And if the right eyes answer, the next moves are quiet. You never send a parade to fix a lock someone shouldn't have picked. I sat still and counted. 13 breaths. The furnace hummed. Amelia's voice pitched higher when she felt the room coming with her. Dad enjoyed his front row seat. Mom arranged her napkin like an apology she couldn't fold right. Grandma prayed with her hands. The cousins watched like subscribers, waiting for a bell to ring. When the side door creaked and the phone with urgent orders DC appeared, my heart didn't leap. It settled. There's a difference. Settling is when the world finally matches what you prepared for. Settling is when the noise obeys the math. Settling is when the ocean doesn't notice you, but you notice yourself, and that's enough. I keep being accused of secrets like they're a crime. They're not. Misuse is. Negligence is. Vanity is. Secrets are tools. You learn which ones to carry and which ones to leave in the case. Tonight, I carried silence. It fit in my pocket, next to a letter with floral corners, and felt heavier the way truth does when you've stopped asking it to convince anyone. I didn't come for revenge. I came to see if my quiet could still hold under a roof that once made me loud. The answer was waiting in the hallway in plain clothes, holding a phone no one could argue with. I kept counting, because counting is how I tell time when clocks are lying. The next part was inevitable. Grandma always started Sundays with the radio low old hymns farm reports, the weather read by someone who remembered your father's name. Amelia had changed the station to some breathy jazz that sounded like a lobby. It fit the chandelier. It didn't fit Grandma. I stood at the sink with her while we waited for the roast to rest. She pressed a palm to my cheek like temperature could tell her everything the last 10 years wouldn't. Don't rise to it, she said again, softer like a password. I know, I said. I brought my quiet. She nodded, once approving the gear I couldn't show. From the kitchen doorway, I could see the living room filling itself like an old photograph developing. Uncle Ray telling the same football story he's told since '89, every retelling adds a yard. Aunt Maggie whispering with the volume of someone who never learned the difference between concern and entertainment. Cousin Jenna pretending not to film anyone while filming everyone. The small-town choreography is dependable coats on the stair rail men, standing not because there aren't chairs, but because standing looks like leadership kids sent to the den with a carton of chocolate milk and an iPad. Mom arrived last of the non-Amelia set, hair done lipstick, perfect eyes calculating. She hugged Grandma and put a hand on my shoulder that didn't commit to which daughter it was touching. You look tired, she said. Which is how people say, I don't know how to talk to you anymore, without confessing they don't. I slept on a bus, I said. It was close enough to true. Amelia made her entrance the way a stage manager cues a light at the edge of conversation, so everyone has to turn to catch up. Navy blazer pressed slacks badge on her hip like punctuation hair in a bun that apologized to no one. She kissed Grandma's cheek, shook Uncle Ray's hand like he was applying for something, and skipped me altogether with precision that read as professionalism to anyone who didn't know the language. Chief, someone said, impressed by their own proximity to the idea of order. Thank you for coming, she answered, eyes never losing the room. She had the head chair set with a fresh runner, new silver, a small arrangement of white lilies like a wreath scaled for a plate. Grandma's chair, her old place at the head, had been nudged down the side. It looked like an accident. It wasn't. People who move chairs for a living know the power in 6 inches. We took our places. Grace was said by Uncle Ray, who managed to make gratitude about ham and football. Plates moved the way they always do, clockwise, steady, generous. I poured water, passed the rolls, complimented potatoes that didn't need flattery. Courtesies are ballast. You keep a table from listing by weighting it with simple things. Dad waited until there was enough cutlery on porcelain to score his monologue. He doesn't speak into silence. He prefers to interrupt. So he said, drawing the vowel like it owed rent. You're back. For dinner, I said. Back is back, he said, and smiled at the people who'd agree out of fear of disagreeing. How long this time? A day? A week? Until the next? What do you call it? He twirled a fork like a baton. Operation. Work, I said. We call it work. Work. He parroted, satisfied he'd made my vocabulary smaller. You left your mother and your sister to hold the line, and you call it work. Mom watched her green beans like they might confess something. Grandma's napkin straightened itself under her left hand. I made arrangements, I said. We all did what we thought best. What you thought best was disappearing, he said. He loved the word disappearing. It made him the one who stayed. And for what? You come home with no husband, no children, no... I don't see anything on your lapel. Not even one of those little ribbons you people wear. You got all that training and nothing to show. There are more generous ways to say you miss your daughter. He doesn't prefer them. I'm here, I said. And that's supposed to be enough, he said and laughed like he'd told a clean joke. Eat while it's hot. Grandma said the closest she comes to a command. Amelia lifted her water glass and tapped its rim with her fork, two polite chimes that sounded like a gavel to anyone listening for one. Conversation thinned, phones found pockets. The radio jazz apologized its way into silence. Before we eat, she began voice calibrated to the room as if she'd practiced over the hum of the dishwasher. I need to address something important. Grandma's hand tightened on her napkin. Mom sat straighter, throat working. Uncle Ray's eyebrows found ambition. Aunt Maggie gave a tiny gasp designed to be heard. I kept my eyes on my plate and counted breaths. Calm is a system. You start it when the lights change. As chief, a lot crosses my desk, Amelia said. Casual, rehearsed. Sometimes it concerns this town. Sometimes it concerns this family. She didn't look at me. Looking is a gift. Some of you have asked me what exactly my sister does, where she goes, what she brings back. She smiled the way you do when you're about to use the word transparency like a weapon. I decided to find out. She produced a red folder from her bag and set it at the empty space by her plate like she'd saved a seat for it. Plastic sleeves, color tabs, dividers, performative organization. She opened it with 2 fingers, letting the hinge creak a sound chosen for effect. I obtained documents through a private source, she said. Applications, records, photos. There are discrepancies. There are falsehoods. She paused to let the words bloom into whatever flower each listener feared. Uncle Ray leaned over to squint at a page upside down. Aunt Maggie sucked a breath like a straw. Cousin Jenna pretended not to angle her camera. Dad folded his arms and rocked back, pleased to be present for revelation. Amelia, Grandma said, not loud, very sharp. It's time, Gran, Amelia said, and lifted the first sheet between thumb and forefinger like a teacher calling a name at roll. This is a federal form, an application for military identification credentials submitted under the name Lillian Caldwell with a DD-214 that does not match public record, a deployment history that cannot be verified through accessible channels, and pay stubs that do not align with known scales. Public record, accessible channels, known scales. Words that sound official when you don't know the locks they don't open. Where did you get that, Mom asked, almost whisper. A source, Amelia said. Legitimate. Licensed, I asked, mild. She didn't answer. She lifted a photo, instead a grainy shot of a storage crate with barcodes any warehouse would recognize if it knew how to read. This was found in a private property rented under her name. She tapped the crate. Classified materials, seals. She has no right to any of it. I didn't look at the photo. I watched the window across the street. A man pretending to walk a dog paused again, leash slack where a dog would tug. His shoes were wrong for the sidewalk. Wrong weight distribution. Wrong kind of looking. Every bad plan hires the same props. I'm not doing this to embarrass anyone. Amelia said a sentence that only appears before someone does. I'm doing this to protect our family and our community. Dad said. Finally, like it was dessert. Lillian, Amelia said, turning to me with all the ceremony she could cram into my skin, I'm placing you under arrest for impersonating a federal officer, fraud, and unlawful possession of government property. No one breathed. That's not true. We all breathed. We just tried not to be heard doing it. Turn around, she said. Amelia Grandma said again, standing now, napkin still folded the posture of a woman who has broken bread across decades and does not tolerate it being used as a prop. Not here. This is official, Amelia said. I won't let her make a fool of you. I stood slowly, not because she'd asked, because I don't let anyone put hands on me while I'm sitting if I can help it. Standing levels the field. It also lets you see the room. Uncle Ray's mouth was open, like he'd forgotten what to do with it. Aunt Maggie's eyes were glossy with a thrill she'd call concern until someone asked her to prove it. Mom stared at the lilies like they might tell the truth. Amelia came behind me, metal-brushed skin, cool then not. The first cuff closed with a polite click. The second took effort and intention. She tightened until my fingers tingled, then gave it one more squeeze like a signature. Pain is a language. I am literate. I cataloged the pressure points, the angle, the way she stood on the balls of her feet to use an extra inch of height like a weapon. I breathed like a watch. Photos. Aunt Maggie asked the room in a whisper too loud to be accidental. Don't! Grandma said a single syllable with the weight of a gavel. Dad exhaled satisfied air, the sound a man makes when a refrigerator finally stops humming. Maybe now, he said to everyone, and no one shall stop pretending. I didn't turn. I didn't give them my face. Faces invite translation. I kept my eyes on the window where the man with the leash bent to pick up nothing and bag it. He left the bag tied to a fence wrong. People who clean up after dogs don't display it. People who pretend do. I pressed my hip back a hair's breadth enough to feel the hidden switch beneath my belt press into bone. If you looked closely, you might have thought I was adjusting for comfort. I was. I pressed once. The vibration answered. One small confirmation that the system designed to notice quiet had noticed. Amelia lifted her chin to address the room, letting the cuffs glint under the chandelier like pearls like proof. Some of you will think this is extreme, she said, pacing behind my chair like a TED Talk in a town with only one stoplight. But you haven't seen what I've seen. You haven't found what I've found. You haven't connected the dots I connected. Dots are dangerous. People connect them into pictures that suit their pastime. I counted seconds. 11, 12, 13. Calm has a rhythm if you practice it enough. No one at the table asked the right questions. Chain of custody, jurisdiction, authorization scope. They asked the wrong ones with their eyes. Is this happening? Are we allowed to enjoy it? What will the neighbors say? The neighbors always say something. The neighbor across the street was already part of this show. Transport will arrive in the morning, Amelia announced like logistics were her private choir. We'll let everyone eat first. I'm not cruel. She believed it. The radio found its signal again, and then lost it a hiss that sounded like the room thinking. The furnace kicked on. The lilies made the air too sweet. My wrists burned and then stopped burning the way hands do when they decide you don't deserve them. I flexed each finger in turn to let the nerves know I was still in charge of them. The side door to the kitchen creaked just a thread of sound. Not dramatic. True things rarely are at first. The creak was small enough to be a draft, but drafts don't move like that, measured, deliberate, not wanting to be heard, but not needing to hide. Amelia didn't notice. She was busy arranging her face into the expression of someone about to be thanked for saving a town. My wrists burned beneath the cuffs, then went numb, the body's way of budgeting sensation. I breathed in fours, the way the corpsman taught us. Inhale, hold, exhale, hold, until the heat in my hands stopped trying to be the story. Some of you will say this is family business, Amelia said, pacing behind my chair like the hardwood was a stage she'd paid for. It isn't. It's criminal. It's fraud. It's stolen valor. She liked the way those words felt in her mouth. They were big enough to make a chandelier look like a spotlight. Stolen valor. Uncle Ray echoed, grateful for a term that let him be on a team. Exactly, Amelia said, and tapped the red folder with 2 fingers like she was swearing it in. You don't get to wrap yourself in uniforms and medals you didn't earn. I thought about the day my class got pinned, sand still in our hair, salt still in our teeth, bodies held together by tape and will. I thought about writing home without actually writing, how sometimes you mail a silence because anything else would be bragging or burden. I didn't think about medals. Medals are for ceremonies. You can't strap them on a team and go under with weight that matters. Aunt Maggie raised her phone just enough to catch the cuffs in frame. For records, she told the heir a woman who believes documentation equals dignity. Grandma didn't look at her. She put her palm flat on the table as if steadying old wood. "Where is this coming from?" Mom asked, voice thin, like she wasn't sure if she was asking Amelia or the room or the past. "Who told you to do this?" "My office," Amelia said without blinking. "My duty." Duty to who I asked, mild enough to be mistaken for polite. "To the truth," she said, and took 2 steps to my left so the lilies and the cuffs could share a frame. I've seen breachers take less care setting charges. Pain is a language. Endurance is a translation. The cuffs bit bone at points I could map with my eyes closed, the place where hand becomes wrist, the tendon that tries to lift a finger despite circumstance. The numb came back in waves, the way surf reminds you it owns the argument. I adjusted my stance by 1/2 inch, enough to give the nerves a vote, not enough to telegraph intent. Bud S. teaches you to suffer without spectacle. Your suffering isn't the mission. Dad leaned back, arms folded, satisfied to be the man who always knew. "You can't run from facts," he announced to the table, as if facts had volunteered to be drafted into a family drama. "Your sister did the hard work nobody wants to do." "The kind that requires a locksmith," I said. He didn't hear me, or he pretended not to. Across the street, the dog walker without a dog had disappeared. That meant one of 2 things. Either the show was over, or the show had moved seats. I counted seconds the way I used to count the last 10 meters to a door that didn't want to open slow enough to be true, quick enough to be useful. The furnace hummed, the chandelier clicked as its filaments cooled to what the room could afford. My heart didn't race. It waited the way good hearts do under orders. "Transport is arranged." Amelia continued scrolling her phone with the confidence of someone who believes replies arrive because she asked for them. "Morning process. I considered tonight, but, well, we're family. We'll finish our meal." She believed that was mercy. She believed cuffing someone at Grandma's table was professional if you let the roast stay warm. "Do you have jurisdiction?" Grandma asked, not meaning to say the word, accidentally revealing the reading she did when the house was quiet. Amelia smiled without teeth. "Chiefs don't ask for permission to do their jobs." "Sometimes they do," I said. "You don't get to define my job," Amelia snapped. And there it was. The crack in the voice training can't sand. She recovered quickly enough to fool everyone who wanted to be fooled. Everyone at that table wanted to be fooled. It was easier than being wrong. The side door sighed again, a hinge remembering it had a part. A draft would have tickled candles. This stirred attention. No one looked up except Grandma, who glanced toward the kitchen, the way women who raised families learn to register a pot boiling dry before it screams. "Keep eating," Amelia said, and no one moved a fork. In a capture exercise years ago, they zip-tied us to a chair and piped in bad radio until the brain begged to confess purchases we hadn't made. The only useful lesson was this: you can own a moment by refusing to perform it. You can sit with your shoulders square and your jaw relaxed and your gaze soft. And you can let the people who need theater exhaust themselves while you conserve. I set my weight on the balls of my feet, breathed through the old pain, and let the room overshare. Cousin Jenna's camera found my cuffs panned to Amelia's badge returned to Grandma's hands. Hands tell truth at a volume mouths can't. Grandma's were steady now. That steadied me. "You know, Lily and Dad said like we were at a barbecue and he was about to explain how to marinade. If you'd been honest, from the start, your sister wouldn't have had to go this far." "Honest?" how I asked. "About what you really do," he said. "Where you go, who you think you are." I let the question settle into the runner between the plates where gravy had already made a geography. Who you think you are has never been a question solved by speeches. It's solved by presence. "Turn her around." Amelia told no one in particular, the tone of someone who expects compliance without looking to check for it. She reached for my shoulder to pivot me and met a certain kind of stillness. Not resistance, stillness. They train you for that moment too, the difference between being moved and choosing your placement. She adjusted her grip and made it happen. It mattered to her that the cuffs were visible when she turned back to the audience. "Some of you will see this as humiliating," she said. "It is. It's supposed to be. Consequences are instructive." The radio cut back in with a whisper of weather temperatures falling, overnight chance of frost north of the county line. I smiled because forecasts still dare to be confident about what comes next. "Any last words?" Amelia asked, and the room performed a collective inhale, the kind people make when they expect a commercial to end. "Eat," I said. Cousin Ray's fork scraped porcelain and then fell silent. Aunt Maggie's phone lowered 2 inches. Mom's eyes flicked to mine, and away a small apology dressed as caution. Dad shook his head like he'd predicted this lack of cooperation and was tired of being right. "Fine," Amelia said, and reached for the folder again. "Then we'll proceed." The side door didn't creak this time. It breathed. Plain shoes on tile sounded like punctuation, not plot. The kind of person who can stand in a doorway and let the room decide whether to see them. The kind of presence that doesn't audition. "Chief Caldwell," a calm voice said from the kitchen threshold, polite like a pronounced period. "We need you to disarm." Amelia didn't turn immediately. She arranged her shoulders first, then pivoted like she was granting access to a scene. "Who are—" "Please disarm," the voice repeated, same tone, same volume, the way people speak when the outcome has already been scheduled. "Right hip. Set it on the table." Dad straightened. Uncle Ray muttered, "What the—" and forgot the rest. Aunt Maggie's phone froze between curiosity and self-preservation. Amelia's hand hovered over her holster. She opted for her badge instead, lifting it like a cross. "This is my house," she said, which is untrue, but sounded like a principle. "This is my jurisdiction." "Disarm," the voice said again, not louder, closer. There's a point in any operation when everyone in the room feels the map redraw itself, even if they can't name the cartographer. This was that point. The cuffs cut my wrists, but they didn't cut into me. The humiliation tried to be the headline and failed. I stood in it, the way you stand in surf knees. Bent, weight-low eyes on the horizon you know better than to trust. I looked at my father. He looked back with the full force of a man who has never had to revise a sentence in public. His eyes were hard, certain relieved to see me lowered to the size of his disappointment. He believed Amelia. He believed the folder. He believed the cuffs were character. He believed this would finally end the bother of me. Some people require humiliation to feel safe. Others endure it because they know it's a weather system, loud, temporary, entirely uninterested in who you are when it passes. Now the voice said as soft as a Sunday prayer. The command in that voice made even the chandelier obey. Amelia's hand hovered, then twitched toward her badge again, like it could rewrite the rules of gravity. The person in the doorway stepped in plainclothes neutral posture, the kind of presence you recognize, not from television, but from rooms where decisions cost paperwork and sleep. "Chief Caldwell," she repeated closer now. "Right hip, weapon on the table, slowly." Amelia's eyes flicked to Mom for backup that couldn't be notarized to Dad for applause. He couldn't deliver to Grandma for absolution that wasn't on the menu. Then she unholstered, cleared the chamber with a movement that would have passed a training video, and set the pistol beside the lilies. The table, suddenly honest, didn't sag. "Thank you," the woman said, hands visible. "What agency?" Amelia demanded. "NCIS," she said, and lifted a finger, just enough for a second shape to appear. Another, plainclothes male, no theater, holding a small black device that hummed authority. He stepped behind me with the courtesy of a surgeon and tapped the ratchet on my cuffs. The lock surrendered with a click that sounded like a room exhaling. I didn't rub my wrists. You don't negotiate with pain in public. I flexed once, catalog sensation returning, and set my hands on the chair back where everyone could see them, do nothing threatening. Dad stared at the weapon on the table like it had betrayed him personally. Aunt Maggie lowered her phone without remembering to hide it. Uncle Ray sat down for the first time that evening, as if his knees had been holding a truth up and were finally allowed to rest. "Ma'am," the mail agent said, addressing Grandma with more respect than anyone had offered her all night, "we'd like everyone to remain seated." "Then speak plain," Grandma answered. "We're not deaf." The woman, Agent Rollins, if I had to guess from the way she owned her vowels, nodded once. "There's an ongoing federal matter that intersects with what's occurring here. We're here to prevent further interference and ensure everyone's safety." Interference, Amelia found her footing in the word like it was a curb she could stand on. "I'm the chief of police. I don't interfere. I enforce." Rollins's glance touched the red folder like a gavel. "You've introduced unvetted material into a civilian setting and detained a federal officer outside your jurisdiction. That qualifies." Mom's fork chimed the plate she hadn't touched. "Federal officer," she whispered, as if the room might fine her for volume. "Who are you talking about?" Dad said, already knowing the answer he didn't want. Rollins didn't point. She didn't need to. She turned half a degree toward me, the way ships adjust course without making a speech. "Ma'am, are you hurt?" "No," I said. "Do you need medical attention?" "No." "Understood." The mail agent moved the cuffs from the table to a pouch with a practiced efficiency that turned metal back into objects. He did not look at Amelia. That seemed to bother her more than being looked at. "This is ridiculous," Amelia said, and reached for her badge again as if repetition could reverse procedure. "If she's federal, why isn't she?" The front door opened without knocking. Not rude, necessary. The air shifted as measured steps crossed Grandma's threshold boots that were not a performance, but a vocabulary. Conversations like this borrow rooms. They also return them. He wasn't in dress blues. He was in command. Where you don't see on parade fields, dark jacket, quiet insignia. Everything tailored to move and stop moving exactly when he chose. Gray at the temples, not because time had won, but because he'd promoted into it. The kind of man who has spent more of his life standing at tables like this than at tables with wine glasses. "Admiral on deck," the mail agent said, not loudly and not for show. Everyone stood reflexively except me and Grandma. Old habits, old courtesies, old knowledge that hierarchy is simply how you keep planes from colliding. He scanned the room once the way you clock exits, faces, weapons, and history in a single sweep. His gaze found my hands, then my eyes. He nodded, not small and not big. Precisely the size of respect owed and offered. "I stood because you stand for what's earned." He raised his right hand. I returned it. The salute lasted exactly as long as doctrine requires and memory demands. "Rear Admiral Caldwell," he said, voice steady as a peer. "We're squared away here." "All clear, sir," I answered. The sound that moved through the room wasn't a gasp. It was calibration, every person silently adjusting their memory of me against the shape of a single fact. Rear Admiral. Not a rumor, not a boast. A rank wearing my name like a uniform wears a body exact. Amelia made a noise that wanted to be a sentence. Who did you? The Admiral's eyes touched her like a bright winter. "Chief Caldwell, I'm Marcus Delaney. You've initiated an action that now intersects with Department of the Navy equities and active naval special warfare operations. We'll need your cooperation." "Equities," Uncle Ray repeated valiantly, trying to keep up. "Interests," Rollins translated merciful. Delaney turned to Rollins. "Weapons secured." "Yes, sir." "Material recovered and logged." He faced the table, not seeking their approval and not fearing their witness. "Ladies and gentlemen, certain items referenced in that folder are part of an ongoing classified transfer under Navy custody. Their chain of custody is federal, not municipal. Displaying, distributing, or detaining based on leaked images is not only inappropriate, it's unlawful." "Leaked," Amelia said, as if her mouth had to test the word before her brain would accept it. I had a source. An unlicensed investigator who misrepresented himself to gain access to a property and manipulated a manual override on a secured container, Rollins said, "No judgment, only facts. We have the messages." Amelia looked at Mom, then at the lilies, then at nothing. People talk about color draining from a face. It doesn't drain. It shuts off like a light in a room you thought you owned. Rear Admiral Dad attempted full of the courage of a man who has hosted 3 barbecues. If she's who you say she is, why all the secrecy? We're her family. Delaney gave him the same respect he gave the door, because need to know is not sentimental. Grandma coughed a laugh she didn't intend. The Admiral almost smiled. Almost. "Chief Caldwell," he resumed, "you will remain available for statements. Your service weapon stays logged with NCIS pending review. You are not to contact outside parties regarding this matter." "I was protecting my family." Amelia said the sentence a raft that looked smaller now that the ocean had an audience. "You were performing a story," Delaney said, even not unkind. "Protection is quieter." The chandelier stopped pretending to shine. It simply lit the room. Mom's hands found each other and decided to be still. Aunt Maggie put her phone face down, like that might atone for its appetite. Cousin Jenna blinked hard as if her eyes wanted to edit. Dad's gaze came to me, snagged, tried to reconcile the daughter he'd sized and priced with the officer who'd just been saluted in his dining room. He reached for certainty and found the edge of a napkin. "Admiral," I said, not looking away from my father, because sometimes mercy looks like holding a gaze, "may I request that any statements be taken here quietly, and that my family not be removed from the residence tonight?" "Granted," he said immediately. "That's what rank buys you when you've earned it, assumption of good judgment." Rollins slid a slim folder from her bag and set it on the table like a coaster for the truth. "These are acknowledgement forms. We'll collect signatures and leave copies. Please avoid social media commentary until you're contacted." "Social media," Grandma repeated like it might be a brand of margarine. "We'll make it simple, ma'am," Rollins promised. Delaney faced me again without ceremony. "You all right?" "Yes, sir." He tipped his head half a degree toward the kitchen corridor. "We'll stage outside. When you're ready." "Aye, sir." He turned for the door. No stomp, no flourish. The kind of exit that returns a house to its owner. The front door closed, the way good doors do once with purpose. Silence took the space he left and did not feel empty. It felt accurate. Amelia remained standing, hands empty, in a way I'd never seen. She looked down at the weapon-shaped absence on the table as if it might apologize for leaving. Dad sat slowly, like gravity had remembered him. Mom finally met my eyes and didn't look away. She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She simply recognized me. That was enough for a breath. I placed my palms on Grandma's table and felt the grooves my grandfather's elbows had worn there. The house had outlived so many arguments, it didn't care to keep score. "Eat," Grandma said, voice steady now. No one moved. Boots on gravel outside found their rhythm. 4 Hummers, humming low engines, patient perimeter set. Authority had arrived, and true to form, had not auditioned. It had simply reset the map. Agent Rollins didn't ask for permission to speak. She owned it by being the only one with facts. She opened the slim folder she'd set between the lilies and the weaponless space and revealed glossy prints, barcodes, a redacted incident report with black lines marching across it like fences. She didn't push them at anyone. She let them sit there, available the way truth is when it doesn't have to perform. "Chief Caldwell," she began, tone crisp as paper. "The source you relied on is a private investigator without a Virginia license who misrepresented himself to a property manager and exploited a manual override on a secured storage container. He opened restricted containers, handled classified materials, and photographed federal assets linked to an active naval special warfare transfer." Amelia's mouth opened, then closed. "I was told—" "You were told what you wanted to hear," Rollins said. "No heat. You received photographs and unsworn statements, printed them, and disseminated them at a civilian gathering to justify detaining a federal officer. That is not chain of custody. That is not jurisdiction. That is not protection." Uncle Ray leaned forward to peer at the black bars. What do the black lines mean? Those are redactions, Rollins said, patient as a nurse. They mark information you are not cleared to see. Then why show us anything? Aunt Maggie blurted, affronted by the idea that a folder might withhold dessert. Either tell us or don't. We're telling you what's relevant, Rollins replied. Not what's salacious. Mom swallowed like she'd been holding water in her mouth for an hour. Are you saying Amelia committed a crime? We're saying several statutes appear to be implicated, Rollins said, and slid a page closer to Amelia without touching her. Unauthorized possession and distribution of federal property, obstruction of a classified transfer, unlawful detainment. There will be a review. You will be contacted. Contacted. Amelia repeated softly, as if the syllables could be negotiated. Dad's chair creaked. He pointed at the folder, at me, at the ceiling fan. Anywhere blame might perch? If my daughter is an admiral, why keep it from us? I looked at him. I could have answered 100 ways that might have soothed his pride or escalated his temper. I chose the one that matched the room. Because need to know isn't a kindness contest. He stared like I'd spoken a foreign language that sounded too much like common sense. Rollins turned a page. The images of the crates you have in your folder were taken within a window when custody transfer was underway. They were tagged and triple-locked with documentation that validates every code on their sides. To anyone with clearance, they look exactly like what they are: legal, logged interim storage. To anyone without, they can look like a scandal. Amelia's throat worked. I was protecting. Your narrative, I said, and immediately wished I hadn't. Words are tools. Sometimes they're also temptations. Her eyes flashed. Not anger. Recognition. The kind you get when the mirror refuses to flatter. Grandma shifted her hand to her water glass. If she's done wrong, you'll handle it, she told Rollins. It wasn't a question. It was a doctrine. Yes, ma'am. Rollins's voice softened by a half degree. Quietly, if people allow it to be. Cousin Jenna cleared her throat. What about the video I took? I didn't post. Don't, Rollins said. Still no heat. Please refrain from sharing content related to this matter. There are real-world implications. Jenna nodded, cheeks pinked by the idea that not everything is content. Delaney hadn't left the porch. You could feel his presence the way you feel a weather front through old windows. Command radiates not loud, not hot, but undeniable. It makes rooms honest. Amelia's shoulders, which had been pulled up like she was trying to make a necktie out of her muscles, probed for a new posture. Her voice came out like a test balloon that didn't want to pop. So, she's really what you said. Rear Admiral in the United States Navy. Rollins confirmed, then added something Amelia wasn't ready for. And your sister. That last word landed heavier than the rank. Families are unclassified. We pretend they aren't. Dad looked down at his hands like they'd deceived him. His fingers were clean nails trimmed. He's always been good at what he's good at: finishing a job, fixing a hinge, making beef taste like Sunday. He's never been good at the invisible work: trust, uncertainty, love without ledger. He lifted his gaze and met mine. For once, he didn't perform certainty. He performed being a person. I thought you were playing dress-up, he said, quiet, ashamed of the boyishness in that phrasing. I know, I said. It wasn't absolution. It was inventory. Aunt Maggie leaned toward Amelia like gossip could be a life preserver. You didn't know, she whispered, already rehearsing the defense. I didn't ask, Amelia said, voice cracking on the second word. Truth scrapes on the way out when it's been caged too long. Rollins gathered the pages into a stack that made no sound. Chief, you'll be given a time and place to provide a statement with counsel. Your service weapon remains logged until then. Do not contact the PI or discuss this matter with outside parties. We will contact you. Amelia nodded, small like agreement hurt. Mom finally stood, hands flat on the table, the way a person stands to make a vow she's not ready to say. She looked at me and then at Amelia and picked a sentence that didn't punish either of us. We will cooperate, she told Rollins. The we was the first accurate plural of the night. Rollins closed the folder and slid it back into her bag. Thank you. Outside engines idled in a patient line. The porch creaked under a weight that was neither threat nor invitation. It was just presence, the way a lighthouse is presence, even when the storm is still a rumor. I looked at Amelia and wished not for the first time that our lives had given us a version of love that didn't require winners. She stared at the empty place where her weapon had been and tried to make a new story out of absence. The badge on her belt looked smaller than it had an hour before. Authority without discipline is costume. She was learning that in real time. Lillian, she said, voice threadbare, why didn't you ever tell us? Because you didn't ask in a way that could hear the answer, I said. I didn't deliver it like a line. I delivered it like a fact. And because my job doesn't let me. Silence moved across the table, like shade at a cookout welcome overdue. Grandma dabbed the corner of her mouth with her napkin, and then placed it down with ceremony like closing a service. We will eat, she declared. We will give statements. We will not put this on the internet. Yes, ma'am, Rollins said, and if she could have enlisted Grandma on the spot, she would have. Delaney stepped back in just enough for his voice to carry. Rear Admiral, he said, and the title felt less like theater and more like a hand on a shoulder. We'll stage until you're ready to depart. Aye, sir. I answered because some rhythms never stop feeling like heartbeat. Amelia rubbed her wrist where her badge had been tapping all night. Am I going to jail? Tonight, Rollins said. No, there will be a process. You'll be notified. Notified. Amelia repeated again, forcing the word to be a future she could survive. She sat down, not at the head, in the nearest empty chair. The room rearranged itself around that fact. Dad cleared his throat, that masculine semaphore that admits nothing and asks everything. He pushed the plate toward me. You hungry? He asked, the only apology he knows how to cook. A little, I said, and took a roll. The bread was dry. I ate it anyway. You take what's offered when it's honest. Mom touched my sleeve. It was the first time that touch had felt like a bridge instead of a checkpoint. Will you stay the night? She asked, tentative, like we were both learning a new language? Or do you have to go with them? I'll stay for statements, I said. Then I have to go. Of course, she said, and the words meant I wish you didn't. Rollins looked at me. Admiral, do you wish to press charges personally? No, I said, choosing peace over satisfaction because peace lasts longer. Understood. The lilies smelled like a funeral that had been postponed. The chandelier didn't glitter. It shed light. The house felt like it remembered all the times it had been asked to hold both love and its many failures. It held. Houses do. Amelia stared at her hands. They were shaking now, not from fear, but from the sudden absence of a story to stand on. I felt something that wasn't triumph. It was relief that the next chapter would be written in a courtroom instead of over pot roast. The law is slower than gossip, but it keeps better records. Rollins gathered signatures with the efficiency of a woman who has shepherded 1,000 difficult rooms. She thanked Grandma first. She thanked Mom. She nodded to me last. Respect has its own order of operations. When the agent stepped back into the hallway, the radio found a hymn by accident, low, old, stubborn. Grandma smiled without meaning to. It sounded like a church where no one asks for details you aren't free to give. I stood palms, memorizing the table's grooves one last time. We're done here. I said not to end anything, but to mark the seam. Quiet isn't an exit. It's a hinge. Outside the night was a small-town night porch light, amber gravel honest engines waiting. The map had been redrawn, and no one had to bleed for it. We gave statements in the den, the room with the old piano no one tuned because it remembered how. Agent Rollins asked questions the way a seamstress takes measurements, no judgment exact. Mom answered with small words that didn't wobble. Uncle Ray tried to turn an anecdote into a map. Rollins let him finish, then set his story gently, where it couldn't hurt anyone. Aunt Maggie confessed to almost posting. Rollins thanked her for the almost like it was a donation. Amelia's turn came last. She sat straight hands, clasped badge gone, pistol logged. When asked for the PI's name, She gave it. When asked how she obtained the photos, she told the truth and winced. When asked why she chose dinner, she looked at Grandma, then at the lilies, and said, "Because she always comes to dinner." It was the closest she came to admitting the plan depended on love and ritual and a table that had fed us even when we didn't deserve it. Outside, the Hummers idled like patient punctuation. Delaney waited on the porch, speaking into a phone quietly, the way men do when they won't let urgency become an excuse for sloppiness. When the last signature was gathered, he stepped inside just far enough for his voice to belong in the house again. "We're set," he said. "We'll roll in 5. Mom walked me to the hall like we were leaving a church potluck, not a federal intersection. She touched my sleeve and didn't remove her hand right away. I would have made a worse mess than Amelia given the chance. She said, eyes wet, but not spilling. I filled our quiet with the wrong people. "Me too," I said. "Different wrong people." She smiled, a tired curve that belonged to the girl who once learned to drive on gravel. "Will you call me when you can't say anything?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "I'll call and say nothing on purpose." That was our truce. Not forgiveness, not flowers. A plan. Dad hovered by the coat rack, pretending to help his own jacket find a hook. He cleared his throat and then remembered clearing his throat hadn't worked all night. "You want a sandwich for the road?" he asked. Maybe next time, I said, and meant it, the way a man means he'll patch your roof when the rain passes. He nodded. "You looked steady," he said, like it surprised him that steadiness had a shape. "Training," I said. "Yeah?" He rubbed his jaw, finding his way around a sentence he'd never practiced. "I was wrong." It wasn't a confession. It was a correction. I accepted it as both. Grandma pressed a wrapped slice of pound cake into my hand because love needs something to do besides ache. "Don't let important people forget to eat," she instructed, which is her way of telling me to remind admirals and agents they are human too. "I won't," I said. Amelia stood by the dining room doorway like someone who didn't know if she should enter the room she had arranged. Her eyes were tired in the way only consequence makes a person tired. When I moved past, she spoke without lifting her head. "I was jealous," she said, "and I was afraid. I thought if I could name you in front of everyone, I'd stop feeling like I'd been left out of the story." "You weren't left out," I said. "You were just in a different chapter." "I made myself the headline," she said, small. "It wasn't mine. There are apologies that ask for absolution and apologies that ask for permission to grow. This was the second kind. "Talk to your counsel," I said. "Then come help Grandma on Sundays." Quietly. She laughed once, a short, broken sound. Quietly, she repeated as if the word had finally offered her a seat. On the porch, Delaney watched the street the way you watch a patient wait, calm, certain. "Rear Admiral," he said with a nod that held both respect and the reminder that the road waits. "We'll take you to base. Debrief will be light. Reports tomorrow." "Aye, sir." He looked past me at the house, at Grandma behind the glass, at Mom turning off the chandelier, at Amelia sitting in a chair that wasn't the head, at Dad pretending the porch light needed his supervision. "Good bones," he said, meaning the structure had endured what the night asked of it. "Strong table," I answered. We rolled out without spectacle. No sirens, no bravado. Chesterville returned to itself, porch lights, dogs reconsidering their fences, a church sign promising Wednesday's spaghetti supper. In the back seat, I let the engine's steady complaint smooth the edges of my wrists. I texted Piper a single word, "clear." She sent back the thumbs up she hates using and a line that made me smile. "Next time, let us RSVP to dinner sooner." The base smelled like coffee and work. We slid through the gate. The sentry saluted Delaney and tried not to stare at me like a news headline. Inside, debrief was exactly what good debriefs are: boring, accurate brief. I confirmed the ping, the sequence, what I saw, what I didn't. No theories, no flourishes. Systems prefer facts. I slept that night in a room that understood privacy. In the morning, I ran the perimeter in air that tasted like winter, deciding whether to stay. My wrists had bloomed 2 clean bands of bruise, nothing dramatic. Pain is an invoice. I paid it and moved on. In the weeks that followed, rumors thinned into facts. Amelia accepted a suspension pending review. The PI found himself inconveniently visible to people who take paperwork seriously. Mom called on Tuesdays and said nothing beautifully. Dad sent me a photo of a repaired hinge with the caption, "It holds." Grandma mailed a clipping of a hymn we accidentally liked. On Sundays, when I could, I called Grandma and let the radio on her counter talk about rain and soybeans. If I couldn't call, I sent her a voice message that said, "Eat while it's hot," and she sent one back that said, "Don't rise to it." Rituals rebuild what pride ruins. The day NCIS closed the family portion of the file, Rollins wrote a note that read like a receipt. "We appreciate your restraint." I pinned it behind my desk where only I could see it. A reminder that power should be quieter than the room it corrects. At a change of command, a month later, I stood at attention while another officer accepted a post I'd been keeping warm. The flag moved, the way flags move, like memory, like promise. After a young lieutenant with hands too big for his sleeves approached and said his mother had watched a sister tear a family in two over a will. "How do you fix it?" he asked. "You don't," I said. "You stop bleeding in places no one can see, and you stop asking people to clap for wounds they don't believe in. Then you do your job well enough that your quiet is louder than their noise." He nodded like he'd been given a password. Maybe he had. I visited Grandma on a Saturday when the sky put on its best blue. We played cribbage. She beat me like always. On my way out, she tucked a folded paper into my pocket. It was a grocery list. Eggs, milk, pound, cake, patience. "Don't forget the last one," she said. "I won't, I promised." 2 months later, Amelia knocked on Grandma's door with a bag of mulch and a borrowed humility. She planted lilies that didn't smell like a verdict. She sat and let Grandma correct her grip on the trowel like she was 12 again. She went with Mom to fix the church bulletin printer. She learned that reconciliation is not a headline. It's a schedule. Dad started packing me sandwiches that tasted the same as when I was 15 and angry. He didn't say "I love you." He said turkey or ham, and then I added mustard because it helps. Men like him tell the truth with condiments. When people ask what the moral is, I give them something simple enough to carry in a pocket. Truth doesn't need volume authority, doesn't need theater, and family doesn't need an audience to become decent. Ask better questions. Respect, need to know. When you're wrong, correct. When you're right, be kind. And if you must choose between noise and discipline, choose discipline. It ages better. If you're listening to this in a kitchen that knows your arguments by heart, here's your invitation. Take a breath lower, your voice, check your facts, and pass the rolls. Protect what's worth protecting with paperwork, with patience, with presence. If this story stirred something, share it with someone who needs a quieter kind of strength tonight. And if you want more stories where silence wins and decency gets the last line, follow along. We'll keep the porch light on.